Hello and welcome to Always Take Notes. In this episode, Eleanor spoke with Laura Weir, who is the editor of the Evening Standard magazine.
Laura spoke about working at the Sunday Times and Vogue before moving to ES, where the circulation has risen under her guidance, and she talked about the problem with pitching these days.
It's a really interesting episode and we hope you enjoy it.
So, Laura, welcome to Always Take Notes. Thank you for having me here at Northcliffe House, which I was just saying to Neve is a bit traumatising, actually, because I had an internship at the Independent here, which was obviously really fun, but it brings back like first day nerves.
Yeah.
So you are ES, the editor-in-chief of ES Mag, which you've been editor-in-chief since 2015, even though your first issue was 2016.
Yes, correct, yeah.
Elton John.
Yeah.
What is your typical day like? Talk me through what today would be in the life of Laura Weir.
There is no typical day. That's like definitely the truth. So my day would either start, I wake up, I get my daughter ready for school, for nursery. I basically spend the first hour of my day wrangling about whether she can wear Elsa leggings or not Elsa leggings, and whether she wants peanut butter on her toast or not peanut butter on her toast. Then she gets to nursery, and then I come into work, and I usually either start with a breakfast meeting or I come straight into the office. And a typical day, the first thing I do when I arrive would be to talk to the team about where we are with the issue that week. And I'm often out of the office and travelling and meeting people, so it's really important when I come in, first of all, that I get a quick snapshot of where we are. So I usually gather around my deputy editor, the art director and head of production, and we kind of sit and just bash through the flat plan just so I can make sure that I'm across all of the big issues that need tackling. And then I'll probably start sifting through my inbox. I get, as most editors do, hundreds of emails, most of which, I find that is a very frustrating part of my...
Are you the kind of person that has to have it down to like under 50
Well,
at all
no,
times?
I can't. It's impossible. I would love that, but it's actually impossible. I think that people need to be much more selective with the emails they send.
I find myself treating it a bit like WhatsApp sometimes. Like sending,
yeah,
it's
it's essentially a hostile, invasive act. You should see it as emailing someone is not... it's usually unsolicited. So, and I don't know, I find it astonishing, the volume of emails that just are not properly directed. I'm being sent to, they're not, I'm not the best person to send them to. There's like lots of people on the team that are much more appropriate.
Yeah. Do you have that thing as a boss where you try not to email people out of hours so as to set a precedent?
Well, I'm talking about people that don't work for me. So I'm totally up for, obviously, my team emailing me at any time they want to, but this is more kind of PRs and people like that. But yeah, so I sort of sift through those. I think the thing is if I was someone that could just not reply, then that would be fine because I'd just ignore them. But I find it really hard to ignore emails, or I'm sure some do slip through the net. So it does take me a while to kind of go through, especially, and I don't want anyone to feel bad. So I kind of email them back and say, thanks for your email. Okay, have you tried this person, that person? Anyway, so that's, I'm putting too fine a point on my email inbox, but that's, it takes up part of my morning. And then I will at some point have a visuals meeting during the week. Some point we'll have a features ideas meeting. We'll start flat planning issues. I'll touch base with commercial because big part of my role is working with the commercial team to make sure that we're on the right track financially and that we're working with all of our partners really closely and supporting them in the best way that we can and coming up with new and innovative ideas in that space. I'll catch up with my editor, George, my managing editor on recruitment issues. It's so varied. How often do you
catch up with George? George Osborne.
George Osborne, yeah. Probably, I'd say 2 or 3 times a week.
And how important is the magazine for the Evening Standard as a newspaper?
It's really important. It's our kind of little golden egg. It's like, it does well commercially. I think it is...
How do you measure the readership? Obviously, it must be quite tricky in terms of readership.
So we measure readership in terms of how many people pick it up.
Okay.
So I think it's 380,000 copies go out every week. And when it's our big fashion editions, it goes up to 400,000. And if you imagine that's one copy and then it gets picked up
Yeah, I always
by
steal
2 or 3 people and left on the tube.
Yes, Mags.
So the number, and also because of the visibility of the title around the city, a number of people that have eyes on that cover, I mean, it goes into millions because, you know, even if they don't pick it up, they see the stacks. So when we're working with agents and people in Hollywood and explaining the power of the title, we always do stress that, you know, there is no more visible supplement in the UK than
because
ES
you often
magazine.
get kind of starrier talent, let's say some of the supplement mags.
Yeah, I mean, I made it my absolute goal to make sure that just because we're a free title doesn't mean that the content shouldn't be worthy of being paid for. So my mission is to make the best weekly magazine in the world, and the fact that
is it the best weekly
I
magazine
think it is. I honestly think it is.
I agree.
Because it's free, it's completely democratized content, but the quality and caliber of what we're offering people is as good as what they would get if they were paying £3.60 as a cover price.
How important is it for you to have a big star on the cover? How important is the cover for you? The
cover is pretty much I'd say 70% of the battle. I think it's our shop window, essentially. It's not always important to have a big star. And I think that's the interesting thing about ES Magazine. I think I try and represent ES Magazine as the way that modern media is disseminated. So it's a mix of high and low. It's a mix of things that get your brain whirring and the stuff that you need to know to be ahead of that zeitgeist curve, but also stuff that's going to take you into the weekend, into a great mood, because it's, you know, we're out on a Thursday, Friday. Cover stars and content that put us, you know, peer to peer with the rest of the industry.
Also, you're breaking a lot of British talent, I feel. Like Marjama, Callum Turner.
Yeah.
It feels like kind of ahead of the curve, whereas maybe somewhere like GQ or Vogue, you have to have made it to be on the cover.
Yeah, and I think that that's our kind of unique space, is that we are in a very lucky position to be able to have Julianne Moore on the cover one week with an interview with Sajid David inside, and then Little Sims the next week from Top Boy. She's also a musician. So I think it's the thing that I think is the most important is the mix. And that's something, you know, Tina Brown and the iconic editors of the past will always say, you know, it's about the mix. It's always got to be something surprising, which is what Martin Ivins taught me at the Sunday Times. There's always got to be, when you open that magazine, something you just didn't expect, which is usually our first news feature. So in the first 3 pages, you know, this week we've got an amazing piece about how data is, you know, the biggest contributor to the climate crisis, essentially. Pornhub creates as much carbon emissions as Belgium does. You know, it's and that's a really interesting feature. Or we'll have a feature about how data is the new oil, or about the cult of the one night lay that's going through London. You know, it's a real kind of stuff that you should know about if you live here, and stuff that we feel people deserve to know, so we try and deliver it to them in the best way possible.
So what would you say is the quintessential ES Mag feature? Does it always need to be quite London focused? I think London is a global city, so by its nature the ideas that we write about and the stuff we reflect, you know, if we were to hold a mirror up to what was going on in the city socially, politically, economically, it's not a kind of parochial lens, you know, it's a big global lens. So we do tackle global issues like our data is the new oil, to refer back to that. But then we will do pieces, you know, brilliant take-home service-led features like the 8 things, the 8 restaurants that London chefs love, or, you know, where to the best, you know, late night bars in the capital, things that, you know, people will find useful. And we have capital gains at the front of the book, which really sets the tone, tells you where you should be going in the city that week. So we do definitely service the London reader, but I think by its nature, the London reader is a global thinker. So we try and deliver content within that. There's what I hear quite a few journalists say is that they kind of find it irritating that a lot of, especially supplement magazines, are kind of obsessed with pegs, and like a lot of features have to have a peg, be that a survey or when I wrote for the Sunday Times, I'd have an idea, but there'd have to be like some relatively maybe small survey to hook it to, and sometimes these surveys are like absurdly irrelevant, but as long as you've got one in the first paragraph, then it's all good, you can write the feature. Is that something that you're wary of, and is that something you really think should exist, or that we should have a bit more freedom with just writing about stuff that's interesting, even if there might not be newsworthy?
I think that
pegs?
the traditional conventions of journalism still stand, and I think it's important to operate within frameworks of things like pegs, because although they are frustrating for freelance journalists or people pitching or writing, you need a way in, and you need a reason to anchor why you're writing about it at that time.
It's not something I notice as much in monthly like Condé Nast magazines, for instance.
Yeah, I think it's whether or not you have the news. I think the news angle is the thing where the peg comes into play. I think if you're a style title, then less so. And I don't think that a peg, I mean, definitely from my perspective, a survey of 200 Londoners about, how they have sex by Durex or what, that's not necessarily going to be the most robust, not to criticise any particular brands, but a brand conducting a survey to prove why they should sell the products they do is not something that would provide a good enough peg for an Evening Standard story, because you can sort of see through those things. But certainly it's interesting if a survey comes out that tells you some information you didn't know. But I think that it's a way of filtering, and the issue is that there's a lot of information out there, and there's a lot of brains that want to express information and write information. And it's really important that you have ways of kind of systematically cutting through the dross and going, oh, okay, so not only does she think that it's interesting that, I don't know, more people are wearing leopard print than ever before, and she's seen it on the catwalk and she's seen it on the street, but she's also got this survey which says that leopard print cheers everyone up by 80%, and that gives you that kind of nice, well-rounded 3-point trend situation where you go, okay, actually maybe we should be reflecting this. So I think a peg is important, because otherwise it's a way of bringing newness to an idea or a fresh angle, because there aren't that many new ideas.
I know, tell me about it. How, when someone pitches to ES Mag, obviously they'll probably pitch to your commissioning editor or features editor, but do people pitch direct to you, and will you take on pitches from your inbox?
People do pitch to me. It tends to be people that I know. It tends to be people that I have relationships with, writers that I have relationships with, or PRs that I have relationships with. But generally speaking, the best people to pitch to are Anna van Praag, who's our deputy editor, or Henry Jones, who's our features director. They're probably the best people to pitch to, because they are, and that goes back to my point about the emails earlier, it's far more useful to go to that person who kind of looks after that patch rather than me, because they're literally at the coalface of it, doing all the work, trying to deliver the ideas. They're the ones that are looking for what you've got, not necessarily me.
Have you seen a decline in the pitch in general?
I've seen a decline in the good pitch. Not necessarily the pitch, but the good pitch. I think that a really well-formed pitch with a headline idea, an amazing sell or stand first, a really strong intro, first par, some anecdotal experience telling us why we absolutely have to write this. I think that people sell themselves less than I would have done when I was starting out. I think, I always remember being in conference at Style magazine and having to really sell my ideas as if they were the best thing you had ever read in your life. And if you didn't let me write it, then we would be making the biggest mistake of our, publishing careers. Like, you would have to push and push and push for your ideas to get heard. And as such, you became completely passionate about making sure that your pitch and your brief and your idea was just completely amazing. And now, I don't know if it's because there's such a variety of medium and it's such a crowded market, but I definitely noticed that there's a laziness that's crept in. I would never think of sending a pitch without a headline idea. I'd never think of not explaining to the receiving editor why, if they didn't run this, it would be a massive mistake.
I guess a lot of freelancers feel they don't have the luxury of just spending hours and hours or even a day on one pitch that just might not get taken up when they've got to make money and they've got to fire off 10. I don't know. I mean, it would be exhausting, the idea.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a necessary evil of if you're choosing that career.
Yeah.
I think it's also to remember that, a good pitch framework can be tweaked for different titles. So if someone comes back and says no, you just make sure you tweak it properly for the next person, but you can still use the same pitch. You just change the dear whoever, because I've had that before, wrong editor, and tweak it as to why it'd be right for that magazine. But I think, yes, it's probably a hassle, but it's
it's worth it.
Yeah.
So tell me about how you came on board ES Magazine. So it was they wanted to redesign it, and they chose you to be the right person to lead that redesign. Like, what came first?
No, they didn't. And there was an editor here who had left, and they hadn't had an editor for a few months. They've been looking and interviewing lots of people, so I don't know if I was the first choice.
So were you headhunted?
Yeah. So I received an email saying, could you please come in and be interviewed for this role? And I was at Vogue, British Vogue at the time.
What was your title there?
Fashion features editor. And
you hadn't been at Vogue for that long?
No, I've been there for a year from the Sunday Times.
So how was it? A bit confusing getting that email, and just in terms of you were probably thinking of staying on a bit longer at Vogue, which for some is like the pinnacle of the fashion industry, journalism.
Yeah. I mean, I had, at Sunday Times Style, I was in a more senior position at the Sunday Times, and I took a slight title demotion to go and work at Vogue, because I was like, I have to go and work at Vogue and see what it's like.
What was your title at Sunday Times?
Fashion features director, but I was also writing across the paper and
your wardrobe mistress.
So I had a lot of different. I was responsible for lots of different. Yeah. And so I got the email when I was at Vogue, and I don't know, I wasn't surprised, to be honest. I thought, this sounds amazing, I'll go and meet them. And then I went and met them. And
who was your interview with?
My interview was with the proprietor of the Evening Standard, Evgeny Lebedev, Amal Rajan, who was at the time editor of The Independent, and a member of the board of the company. And I went in, I met them, I spoke to them about, they asked me what I thought of the title, what I would do with it.
What did you think of the title at that point?
I'd always loved ES Magazine because I grew up in London, so it'd always been a fixture of my life. But I felt like I could make it more reflect the city better.
Do you think it's targeted a younger audience demographic?
I think it's targeted a slightly younger demographic, potentially, but I think more than that, it's targeted a more diverse demographic. My whole brief was that it deserved a redesign. I think that was the main thing, is it deserved a redesign, and it deserved a little bit of a shake up and to be relaunched back into the market, because I felt like it had been such a fixture on the London scene for so many years that people had forgotten how amazing it was and its potential. So that was kind of where I was coming from. And I always found completely compelling the power of reaching so many people. I thought it was amazing that I was at Vogue, the institution and legacy icon that is Vogue, yet ES Magazine would reach more people. And I always found that an amazing opportunity.
What do you think was the most successful change that you brought to ES Mag?
I think I got people talking about it again, and I think that's really important. I think people started to notice it again. Through
the quality of it, or through marketing strategies?
There's been no marketing really. So yeah, just sheerly through the people that, getting great talent, it looking really good, getting the mix right, bringing on new writers, making sure aesthetically it was competing visually with what brands were producing, with what, you know, the sophisticated taste that we see on Instagram, with, you know, just leveling up.
How nervous were you before? To quote who, sorry?
You know, there's that song, is it Ciara, Level Up?
Oh, yeah.
I think that basically it was an amazing, it's always been an amazing magazine. It's had different personalities under the different editors it's had, and under each one it's had an amazing incarnation. And when I joined, it hadn't had an editor for a while, so it had kind of just, you know, been cracking on its own, and I think it just needed to be re-identify itself, essentially.
You also have a column for the Evening Standard. I always just think how exhausting it must be to generate ideas for a column every week.
Yeah, it's probably the worst thing about my job.
How and you must also feel pressure to mine your personal life and share opinions that maybe you wouldn't necessarily feel that comfortable sharing. You've talked about your experience as a single parent. You've talked about Meghan Markle, which I know whenever a female journalist writes about Meghan Markle, they get such vitriol. Like, how tricky is that for you to decide what you want to share, what you don't want to share, and how much you feel like you have to share just because you've got to have ideas every week? I
think if you're offering yourself up as a comment writer and your brief, so my brief within, you know, that doing that part of my job is that I talk about being me, and I think that that's the important thing. I think if you're taking that space, I do it every other week. You do have to be game for you know, what is expected, otherwise just don't do it. There's no pressure, you know. If I didn't want to do it, I wouldn't have to do it.
So whose idea was it to become a columnist?
George and I had a chat, and we thought it would be a good idea.
And because it's good for the magazine to feel like readers can know their editor, because a lot of the time editors are kind of in the kind of gilded castles,
I think
right?
perhaps that, I mean, I think perhaps that was part of it, and also that as a voice and a profile, that was a good decision. Yeah, I think that's you're probably right. I didn't actually give it that thought, but I think you have to be prepared to share parts of your life. That's part of the game.
Is there anything you've regretted sharing?
I've regretted sharing a couple of things. But I think overall I do try and make sure that I put some personal checks and balances in, and I don't overshare too much. But then you have to be aware of, you know, if you've got an Instagram platform, you're basically, and you put your kids on Instagram stories, and you share kind of most aspects of your life, that you are, you know, it's like, do you do that and then not write about it? Where's the line? I just tend to just go with my gut, and if it feels right when I'm writing it, then I generally think it's okay.
Do you get a lot? I noticed you don't have a Twitter account, but you used to.
I used to.
So is that because you can't deal with? I
sort of fell out of love with Twitter, and the auto. What's the word? It's auto dictats, isn't it?
Yeah.
You know, it's like an echo chamber for you. Sort of follow the people's opinions. You want to reinforce your own, or perhaps learn other opinions. And I see its place certainly in the landscape, and I think it's a useful tool culturally. But for me, I would get a substantial amount of trolling and
from your opinion pieces.
Yeah, and I think generally, you know, not to play the woe is me, women in the media card, but I think you are sort of fair game.
Do you notice a discrepancy between the kind of feedback your male colleagues will get when they write a column?
I don't notice. I haven't looked. I've never looked into it, but there were other reasons I came off Twitter as well, because I just felt like I was having to manage too many apps and accounts, and I felt for me personally Instagram was much more in keeping with my the things I enjoy. You know, visually I enjoy that as a social media platform, and Twitter just for me became repetitive and slightly toxic, so I just came off that a few years ago now. but I do see it's still got a place, and I know so many people just absolutely love it, and I totally understand why. But I just think there's only so many places that you can manage and express yourself and edit yourself, and it just becomes quite a lot to handle, I think, in terms of
agreed.
The day-to-day career, the Instagram, the Twitter, the podcast, all of it.
I have so many blocked words on my Twitter account.
Oh, do you? I didn't even know you could do that.
Words I can't repeat out loud, but because I got so many trolls coming after me after I wrote about Nicki Minaj or the Barbs. Let's talk about Vogue a little bit. So when you got that call to ES Mag, was there any part of you that was conflicted?
Yes, I remember being conflicted because I thought, my God, I'm so lucky to be at Vogue. And I think it's that symptom of having, such a well-respected title. It's held in such high esteem. It really is, for most, the pinnacle of kind of where you could get to in your career. And I was very torn between having just really arrived and leaving to take this new opportunity.
Well, do you still read Vogue now?
Yeah.
What magazines do you read as well as Vogue?
So I get most magazines to my office on subscription, which is one of the best bits of my job. I read all of the supplements.
What would you read for pleasure?
I like Atlantic. The Atlantic. I like the New Yorker.
Takes about months to read every New Yorker, though.
It makes me feel dead clever. I read that. I like the Sunday Times magazine.
Yeah.
I think that's probably the best.
I suppose you have like a loyalty as well
in the market.
Who is your rival supplement?
Well, I always think our rival is anything that distracts your attention. I think that in terms of what the market are doing, there isn't one particular magazine that I'm sort of, that gets my goat every time I see it, because I think, oh my God, we should have got that. I feel incredibly lucky and confident in my position here that I feel that we are leading the market in so many ways, and we're doing things our way, and as such I don't there isn't a title where I think, oh God. But saying that, there are instances when that happens. I think that people have great ideas, and my friend Johnny Heath at GQ launched GQ Hype. I thought that was a great idea. I think the Sunday Times magazine do some brilliant concept covers. I think that, just trying to think, that there's been a couple of moments recently I thought, credit where it's due, and it's brilliant because it makes a more exciting landscape to work in. There's no point
to have a bit of competition.
Well, how boring if you don't have it. I kind of want to be trumped on exclusives and trounced on ideas. Otherwise, it's it takes the fun out of it. That's the whole point.
Are there any other editors in Britain that you particularly look up to and learn from still now?
Martin Ivins at Sunday Times taught me a lot, as did Tiffany Dark, who was my editor at Style.
Best advice?
Well, Geordie Gregg once told me just never go over budget, and I think that's really good advice.
That's probably quite crucial. And have you?
No, I'm actually really good on my budgets. I take great pride in making sure that I stay on budget with my editorial costs.
Have your budgets increased as your?
I don't think anyone's budgets have increased in any part of the market that I know of.
Okay. In terms of where Vogue was when you left, obviously, I don't know if you've read the fascinating New York mag piece about kind of the future of Condé Nast, which kind of talks all about how it's like this, the future of where, basically its future and how it's going to navigate digital. It's kind of got its fingers in lots of pies, but also through doing that has kind of diluted some of its core brands a bit because they're kind of centralizing teams, and so the essence of brands has been a bit lost, which is debatable. Is that something that you were worried would happen to Condé Nast when you were about to leave? Did you think that was a good moment to leave because maybe Condé Nast was not in its best shape?
No, I had no sense of that whatsoever. I had no sense that I was leaving something that wasn't in its best shape. I was leaving something that felt quite, stable and exciting. And I hadn't been there that long, I'd only been there for a year, and I think it takes you 6 months to kind of get bedded in somewhere anyway. So no, I didn't feel that.
So do you think that it's just that people love kind of predicting the doom of glossy mags, that people kind of revel in it somewhat?
I think there's a certain one narrative, definitely. I think that people have been talking about the demise of print for 15 years, 20 years. So I'm sure that comes into it. But I just think that, I think that's definitely one part of the narrative. And I think everyone is navigating the market the best way they know how. And it's a challenging place, and it's an interesting place, and things are changing all of the time. And then we all are doing our best to service our readers in the, with the best products we can possibly produce.
What were your favourite stories to work on at Vogue? So Giselle
I
was your
interviewed
first.
Giselle. That was great, and she was brilliant. And that was kind of a nice, neatly tied up memory package, in terms of like an experience, because I researched the article, I flew out to New York, I was on the shoot on set with her and the stylist and the photographer, and then I stayed behind, I interviewed her, then I had to turn it around really quickly, and it was my first Vogue cover story, and she was such a dream that it made it kind of a pleasurable and interesting experience.
Do you miss interviewing celebrities?
I don't miss writing actually at all.
Oh really?
No, because I'm a much better editor, I think, than I am a writer. I've always been a good editor, but writing, I'm not one of those people that has words within me, that I'm desperate to explore and express. They don't just trip off the tongue. It takes me a while. I find it quite a long process. Whereas editing, it comes very naturally to me.
Do you edit the cover stories at ES Magazine?
I proof every page of the magazine. Yeah. So something I probably should stop doing, because it's like...
Yeah.
I kind of think that's why... That's part of the reason why ES Magazine is good, is great, because it has so many eyes on the proofs. Like I do proof every single page, and I don't know many editors that do that, but I'm sure there are definitely still some. What's
been your favourite cover for ES Mag?
Oh God, it's probably my London United covers after the Grenfell tragedy. I wanted to try and show solidarity and support, and I enlisted the help with my amazing team. It's all the team as well, of some great creatives, and we created a series of London covers celebrating London, and London's united spirit in that moment. And that was definitely a career highlight, a personal highlight, and just a really amazing thing to be involved in.
How important is video for you? If there's some great little concepts like the this or that interview segments with your cover stars, how essential is that? I suppose when you're doing a weekly, like it's just so much work already, you don't have time to think about like Condé Nast style video concepts.
I think that's the important thing for us to remember, is that we are in a weekly environment, so we are already kind of super pacey and trying to churn out a lot of content in a very short space of time. But for me, I'm always looking at how we can push ourselves to be better and offer more. And I don't think you can just print a magazine. Of course you can, and that's fine. But I think that, why not try and do some great video as well? And so we've just launched our This or That franchise. And I love video content. When it's done well, I think it can be really terrible if it's done badly. Excuse me. So yeah, I try and make sure that we get some video content every week, from our cover stars especially. And I think it's another way of, bringing the magazine to life. And for people that don't live in London, for example, that can't get their hands on the hard copy, it helps us elevate and reach a wider, more global audience through our website and through our video content. So it is an essential part of the ES Mag brand offering.
And so we're kind of going back chronologically, how did you get into the industry? Did you go to university?
Yeah, so I went to the London College of Printing.
Okay.
And I studied journalism. And then
Do you think that was useful?
Yeah, 100%.
Did you do it at City or else? Oh, sorry, you studied at that, yeah.
So it's now ELLE's London College of Communication,
Okay,
I think it's called. But it was called London College of Printing. I mean, I started off there, and then I did a million internships, like loads of internships, and then got my first job on a trade press writing about DIY. So that was my first job. I
remember Eleanor Mills saying that she started writing about tyres. I think she worked for and she said it was like the best way to cut your teeth because you're forced to make something that you're not interested in interesting.
Yeah, exactly. And also it forces you just to learn the codes and conventions. You know, you have to be able to report on buttons as they are, you know, coffee cups, as you would write about the chair industry, as you would write. You use the same, you know, hierarchy of information. You use the same sort of news value structure. When you're doing a news story, especially a trade news story or a news story for the paper, the structure remains the same and the subject just changes. So it is an amazing place to cut your teeth, and it's just really, really good grounding. That trade press is such a valuable part of the market, I think. You know, like Cage and Avery Bird and, you know, Retail Week, Property Week. You know, there's a trade press for everything. And I think that we should try and support those titles more, because they are not only a breeding ground for talent, but they're a breeding ground for expertise and niche knowledge, which I think is a really interesting space actually in the future, and reflects in the rise and popularities of journals, actually, those kind of like, you know, Plant Magazine or the Gourmand, where people are kind of narrowing their field of interest and field of vision into and specialising. And I think that trade presses are the progenitor of that idea.
Have you noticed journalists coming up in the industry have become kind of a bit more spoiled and a little bit more like, I don't want to write about that, that's not kind of worthy of what I want to write about, and are less willing to do the task that maybe you would have done as an intern and been happy to do?
I certainly, I don't know if it's to do with, I wonder if it's like a generational thing, but and this isn't a good thing, but I certainly feel like when I was interning, I would have done anything, you know, literally anything. Like
I was like a caretaker when I was an intern, like shifting stuff.
I mean, I remember writing so many envelopes using a solvent marker for hours, so long, in a cupboard with no ventilation that I just passed out.
Did you actually?
Yeah, I passed out and was there for hours on the floor, like 2 hours on the floor, woke up, you know, completely sick. Yeah. And I didn't tell anyone because I was just so worried that they would think badly of me. But I worked so hard. Nothing was too much. No hours were too long. I wouldn't have even occurred to me to ask to be paid or to get a byline or to say kind of what's in this exchange for me.
I'm not doing your transcription.
Yeah, well, you know, I was like, yes, of course I'll do your transcription.
Like, oh my God,
she asked me to do her transcription. You know, I honestly thought that, you know, and I've thought this anyway at every stage of my career, that in that moment I'm the luckiest person ever. So I just completely threw myself into it, and that's not a great thing. You know, there are great things to that approach. Excuse me, but there are, you know, now people have a much greater sense of self, boundaries.
At Vogue, can I say that I shared a chair with fellow interns? We had one
chair to perch on.
No, but to share with another intern, we had one chair to share and a computer, because there were 3 interns, because Vogue had that like revolving intern thing where there was like head intern. And I remember, and like, that's mental. And I remember everyone in the exit interview would be like, I think we should have one more chair.
It becomes such a big deal, doesn't it? Those sort of details. I'd like more pens if that's okay. But yeah, I mean, I think now people have a greater sense of their personal worth and boundaries, perhaps. And, you know, I've certainly seen a shift in that for sure.
I think also maybe just millennials are maybe a little bit more entitled with which can be a good thing, just in terms of like what they deserve.
Yeah, I mean, I think what they deserve, and also I think that there's a...
And self-respect has become a much bigger thing of the last years.
Exactly. You know, to have this sense of self-respect, it was never a thing. You know, you didn't need it to be a thing.
Flattened yourself.
You just sort of got on with it. But I think that there's also the argument around time and patience, and I think that was a different thing as well. So we live in it definitely feels like a faster world, more opportunities, more places to go, more places to work, more people to see, more people to talk to, more pictures to post.
Do you have interns here?
Yeah, we have interns here, and I think that when I was interning, you do it for a time, you move on to the next, whereas I see the interns here now, it's like, you know, they want bylines, they want to be visible, they want to make the most of the opportunity. I mean, it's great. I think it's amazing to have that hunger and ambition, and, you know, actually I'm not just going to piss around in you know, doing this when I could be making the most of it. So I think it's a good thing.
So do you have paid internships here?
Yes, we pay expenses and travel.
And how long are they for?
I'm not actually sure because I don't organise them. That's terrible, isn't it? But we follow the legal guidelines. I think there's a guideline that recently came out. Yeah. But we definitely, you know, we made sure we fell in line with that. And Neve, who you've met, organises that with the desk heads, because I don't use interns, but they work with the interns, and the interns come and help, and they work in the cupboard or they do research, and we try and give them as many opportunities as we can.
Yeah. Okay, so after you studied journalism, then you worked at Trade Magazine, and then where did you? It was then you went to Drapers.
So then I was at Retail Week. I interned at Drapers, and then I got a job at Retail Week. Then I went to Drapers and got a job there, which is fashion, because I'm a girl. I liked fashion. When I look back, you know, I'm being sarcastic. I was writing about tyres and bolts and nuts and cladding and DIY, and then I got this job at Drapers. So then I went and I worked my way up there to a desk editor role. I think fashion editor. And then I left there and went to work at Elle online to do a maternity cover. And that was kind of my jump, because there was always this thing of, well, you'll never get out of trade. Once you start in trade, to move into consumer is really hard, and you usually have to go the paper route. So I moved over to Elle online, did a cover there. Then when that ended, I had a brief stint working for Mohammed Al Fayed and Kokoza, which was a retail business he owned. And then from there, I went to Sunday Times Style. I got a call from Claudia Croft, and she interviewed me and said, I remember I was on my way to the Brit Awards with a friend, and she rang me. My mind was blown. And then so I went and met her and Tiffany.
So you headhunted for that role as well?
Yeah.
Gosh, you've been lucky not to have to apply to many jobs.
Do you know, it's like my biggest anxiety. I've never had to apply for a job.
Never?
Not in this career. I mean, I've applied for loads of jobs. I've been working since I was 15. So I've applied for lots of jobs, but I've never applied for a journalism job, no.
Do you feel like you'll ever move across the pond and ever edit an American magazine?
I'd never say no. I'm always open to...
Is that always the big ambition for kind of every British editor?
I don't think so, actually. Not that I know of. I think that everyone's got their own ambitions, haven't they? Certainly not an ambition that I know to be a universal one amongst British editors.
Is there a magazine in particular that you would love to work on? This is all very hypothetical. You're obviously very happy here, but...
There isn't, actually. I know that sounds not true. There isn't one that I think, oh my God, I would love to edit that magazine specifically. I think that there's a myriad titles that would be exciting opportunities to work on, but I honestly think ES Magazine is the best in, you know, I think the weekly supplement space is really interesting space, and I think ES is the best one in that space. So,
and 3 quick questions before we have to wrap up. What has been your biggest failure that you've learnt the most from? Maybe as an editor.
I think my biggest failure last year, I burnt out quite badly last year. I was definitely exhausted by the end of the year. And when I say badly, like, I was fine, but I definitely noticed that I had pushed myself quite hard. And I think my biggest failure has probably been not taking enough care of myself and focusing on the job, I would say. So it's not that I don't focus on the job as much now, it's that I focus on myself more.
Yeah.
I've just kind of stepped that up, because it's not brain surgery. I'm not on call, but it's a stressful job, and I think,
of course,
I'm such a perfectionist, and I give myself a hard time if I'm not doing the best. And I think last year that bit me on the arse, so I've kind of learned from that.
And obviously, apart from ES Mag's work, what would you say was kind of some of the best, either the best editorial campaign or the best editorial launch or just the best cover that you've seen maybe over the last year in magazines?
Not ES.
Not ES. Which obviously has the best.
Oh, there's so many, aren't there? Good ones. I'm just trying to think recently what I really liked. I'm sure when we wrap this, a million will come to me. I like that Donald Trump impeachment cover. I think it's the New Yorker recently, just him sat under a big peach. That just comes to mind because it was recent. So yeah, that was a good one.
Okay. And what have you just been proudest of in your entire career, or maybe more specifically ES Mag?
What am I proudest of? I'm proud when I see people reading it and people commenting.
Must be amazing sitting on the tube. Do you take the tube?
I'm actually really claustrophobic, so I tend not to take the tube, but I see people picking it up on the mainline train station that I commute from, and I love seeing people read it. I love sitting next to people reading it, and they open it, and my picture's there, and I think I'm that person, and I'm sat next to you. And sometimes I'll tap them on the shoulder and chat with them.
Oh, cool. Do you notice stuff like how long they spend reading every article?
Yeah, I forensically watch how they read it, and
how long
it's
they look at the
really
cover
interesting.
for.
Yeah. And I was sat next to a woman, and I'd say she was about 55, and she was reading it. She's really poring over my Ed's letter, and I was so chuffed because I always think people just sort of skip by that page. And I asked, I said, "Oh, that's me." And she said, "Oh my God, I love your magazine. It's so great." And that makes me very proud.
What about when you see people not leaving it on the tube and actually putting it in their bag and taking it home?
Yeah, that's the winner.
That must be, yeah.
When you see people Instagramming, my weekend with ES Magazine, or a Sunday bath reading ES Magazine, they've taken it out of its, natural frequency, which is Thursday, Friday, and they've thought, okay, I'm taking it home, I'm putting it in my bag, I'm going to read it at another time, and really building it into their lives. I think that's an amazing thing.
Do you keep every copy?
I've got every copy, yeah.
What do you do with them?
Neve stores them for me somewhere for the,
until the time is right.
Yeah.
Well, Laura, thank you. You've been a brilliant guest.
Thank you for having
me.
me.
So much.
Hello, it's us again with an update with our lives. Ellie, how are you?
I'm very well. This week I have been writing a lot about death. I've been writing about Lil Peep, who is an emo rapper who very tragically overdosed on Xanax in 2017, and a documentary about his life has just come out. So I've written a 3,000 word piece on that, and it was very moving.
You look exhausted.
If I say so myself. I am. I've been listening to a lot of emo rap over the last week, and my colleagues had to tell me to turn it down.
I mean, that's your usual audience, isn't it?
What have you been doing?
What have I been doing? I find it quite hard to think.
God, that's what I'm usually like.
I closed another magazine piece, which is why I'm in a bit of a sort of zoned out mode. Big story for 1843 about a subject we're not allowed to mention, the Alps.
Oh my God. Move on.
So that's out at the end of the month, which is very exciting.
Who were you pitching this morning in your coffee when you didn't allow me to sit next to you? And
the Financial Times. So we'll see about that. But otherwise I've been good. I'm travelling for a magazine piece next week. To Stafford. Very glamorous. And
where's Stafford?
It's in the countryside, Ellie. Outside London. Anyway, this has been Always Take Notes, hosted by me, Simon Acombe.
And me, Eleanor Halls.
Our producer is Nicola Keane. Our graphic design is by James Edgar. Our score is by Jess Danheiser.
Please rate, review and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, and also you can find us on social media. I just realised you can't rate and review and subscribe on Spotify, but just rate, review and subscribe on Apple. Please also tweet us at Take Notes Always, or find us on Instagram at Always Take Notes.
It's broadcast gold, Ellie. Thank you.
Thank you.
Goodbye.